Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karker Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, personal response to the chapters, and discussion of how these chapters connect to the rest of the series. As usual, we will begin the video with a reading of the chapter that we are currently on. This is Chapter 70, Where Hollows Fear to Tread. What? Wow! I had no idea this huge space was underneath Mr. Kisuke's store. It's cool. It's like a secret base. Cool. I'm touched. What a sublime reaction. Thanks. Orihimi's got a real gift for making friends with people that she just met. She's the opposite of these guys. How they do over there. Hey! What's that look, Ichigo? Okay, kiddies. Pay attention, please. And away we go. Alright. This gate leads to the Soul Society, the Senkaimon, the Tunnel World Gate. Please listen carefully. I'm about to tell you how to pass through this gate without dying. Bleach, Chapter 70, Where the Hollows Fear to Tread. Whoa! It actually comes out quite easily. So you're not in this Ichigo anymore? Of course not. Don't talk about me like I'm a Pez dispenser. But why are you guys touching my body? Yeah, that's gonna be my body for a while. Stop touching it. Hey. Oh, Orihime, you can touch it as much as you want. Cone, what are you doing here? A talking stuffed animal? Huh? What do you mean? I'm going too, of course. I won't let you leave me behind. I intend to ride into Soul Society, whatever happens. Dream reunion. Ah! Why are you here? Stop! Everyone, eyes over here. I shall now explain the gate. This gate has a Reishi Hinkan key, a spirit particle conversion machine on top of a normal tunnel world gate. The two are attached by covering the gate with Katsugo Fu union tags. Spirit particle conversion? Correct. As you know, the Soul Society is a world of Kanpaku. It is impossible to enter it without looking like a Kanpaku. But, as you know, only Mr. Kurosaki, a Soul Reaper, can move about as a Kanpaku. Even if Kanpaku were removed from the rest of you, their chains of fate would still be attached, so you'd barely be able to move, much less travel to the Soul Society. That's where the Reishi Hinkan Ki comes in. It converts matter, called Kishi, which makes up most things in this world, into Reishi, or spirit particles, which are the main components of Kanpaku. In other words, without even removing the Kanpaku, if you walk through this gate, yes, you can enter the Soul Society looking exactly the way you do now. Alright, I got it. Let's go through already. Oh, and now for the most important point. Passing through the gate itself is no problem. Ichigo. The spirit particle conversion is painless. If you move forward, you will indeed reach the Soul Society. The problem is time. The Senkaimon can only remain open and connected to the Soul Society for a brief time. 4 minutes at most. 4 minutes? After 4 minutes, the gate will close, and you'll be trapped in the Dangai, the precipice world between this world and the Soul Society. Forever. In addition, within the Dangai, a restrictive current called the Koryu that paralyzes Kanpaku in order to prevent the entry of hollows and other foreign invaders. If even one of your limbs gets entangled in it, the possibility of passing through the Dangai within the time span becomes close to zero. Then, how can we go forward? Mr. Yorichi? Didn't I tell you? The heart and the soul are connected. The state of the heart is crucial. The will to go forward will be your guide. Have no doubt, have no fear. Do not stop, do not look back. Do not think those you are leaving behind. Just go forward. Those who can do that, follow me. You're preaching to the choir. The moment we came here, all of our minds were made up. Just so you understand, boy, if you lose, you will never return to this world. Then I'll have to win. Exactly. Are you ready? Run in as soon as it opens. All right. Cone, take care of my family. Here we go. Yeah! This is Don Guy. Come, don't just stand there. Run! Oh, the wall of Kodayu is coming. It's all up to you, Mr. Kurosaki. To be continued in Volume 9. Wah, just when I thought he was here to stay. Ichigo took off again. Bleach Extra, Radio Cone 3. Yo, how you guys doing? Here's the Yosuke Kumazoka of the Bleach world, everybody's idol, Cone, in the house. Today I went through the trouble of getting dressed up to announce the results of the Bleach popularity poll, so you'd better appreciate it. The top characters will have the honor of appearing on a special roster. Who will receive this great honor? Special poster, I should add. By the way, here are the poor losers that didn't crack the top 10. And from the bottom up, we have Michiru Ogawa, Chappie, Motoriko Tono, Sora Inoue, Orahime's older brother, Minos Grande, Yuichi Shibata, The Pictures Rukia drew, Ryo Kunieda, Tessai Tsukubishi, Masaki Kurosaki, a tie between Shunkyu of Shunshin Rika and Rinji Abarai, Tsubaki of the Shunshin Rika, Don Kanoji, Kubo Tight, Byakuya Kuchiki, Jinta Hanakiri, Misato Ochi, Karin Kurosaki, Yoruichi, Chizuru Hansho, Yuzu Kurosaki, Ishin Kurosaki, and Keigo Asano. In other words, nobody gives a flippity flap if any of these lamos are in Bleach or not. Haha! What a waste of space! What do you say? Bostov? Aren't you Bostov? Watch your mouth, buzzball! Why doesn't anyone question the fact that a stuffed animal is talking? Alright, here are the top 10, and you fools better make sure to read this page before going on to the next one. Alright, these are the characters that will be on the poster. First is Ichigo Kurosaki. Second, Rukia Kuchiki. Fourth is Cone. These are the top 10 Bleach popularity poll results. Third is Uryu Ishida. Fourth was Cone. Fifth, Orihime Inoue. Sixth, Yasutora Chad Sato. Seventh is Kisuke Urahara. Eighth is Tatsuki Arasawa. Ninth is Mizuru Kojima. And 10th is Ururu Tsumugiya. This is a great color spread if you want to try to look it up. But yes, this is the Bleach popularity poll results. 11th place and lower are all posted on this next page. And here we can see all of the rankings for everybody. Kind of surprising, how low some of the characters like Byakuya Kuchichi and Rinji Abarai are, but I guess, the idea is that they've had less time on screen to really grow on people. This is probably the last time in which Keigo will be more popular than someone like Renji. But hey, got Minos Grande. I feel bad for Grand Fisher, only got 12 votes. Less than the weirdo of the R&D department. Which at this point, I'm sure they were talking about, not Hiyosu, but like literally the weirdos that Rukia was nebulously mentioning. Here we can see the people that got barely any votes, and I do love some of these choices, like the spirit of the bad bear, the hollow that Shrieker put out. We've got the grandpa and son during the blackout. Snake whistle, the parakeet that's not Yoichi. The doll Uryu fixed. The person who raced Orihime and Ichigo in Orihime's fantasy. The desk used for throwing. Nancy. Randy Johnson. The spirit of the office worker who was Consort in episode 1. Yeah, pretty good. All of this. Anyway, I'm glad Oblelo got a vote. But these are the results from the first popularity poll taken from August 2002. Votes were collected at the beginning of episode 1. And I assume they mean at chapter 51, not episode 1, chapter 51, because the anime didn't air until 2004, as far as I recall. So, yeah. Offering the top 10 character poster to 100 people work. We received a lot more votes than we expected. Byakuya, Renji, Yorichi, who are new, ranked high. One guy voted 200 times for Miss Ochi. There was one vote for a character from my previous work, Akutabi Gama. By the way, that is the main character from Zombie Powder. You should go read Zombie Powder, it's pretty good. And I might cover it on this channel at one point if I can get good scans of it. And there were a lot of maniacs. Looking at all the results, I think it came out pretty interestingly. It was fun. I hope we can do it again in the summer. Finally, we have Radio Cone Baby 2. We are Radio Cone Baby. Yo, what's up? I thought you were excuse me. Though we said it would be an intermittent feature, we got such an overwhelming response that we couldn't back off even if we wanted to. So, our guest today is, Tatsuki Arisawa. Thank you very much. Where are we? Oh, it's you. Orihime's friend. I don't know your name. Who are you? Are you like a doll or something? Why are you moving and talking? Is it because you're radio controlled? What are you babbling about? Come on, let's just do this. I don't know what you are, but okay. Is the accent in Tatsuki on the ta are the key? I've gotten into a lot of arguments over this, from Kappa King, Hokkaido. What? These questions are about me? Well, you're the frickin' guest. Just shut up and answer it. You're a rude talking doll. Well, the accent in Tatsuki is on the ta. It's like ha-zuki. That would be the first syllable, folks. Ichigo's room has a bed. So, why is his closet filled with futons? Tatsuki, you're good friends with Ichigo, so you must know this one, right? Asuka Koizumi, Kanagawa. What about it, Tatsuki? Ichigo's house doesn't have much storage space, so Yuzu and Karin and Beardman's winter bedding are stored in Ichigo's room. But how does this girl know about Kurosaki family's closets? Are you a friend of Ichigo's? The other day, I used my handicraft skills to full effect and made a cone, see photo. But without the insides, it's not a genuine cone. Excuse me. Will you please tell me how to make a soul candy or where I could buy some? Rose, Nagasaki. Soul candy can only be found in Mr. Urahara's shop. Is this for real? You did a good job. Even the weight and the size are perfect. That's awesome. You could sell this. It's sure to be a big hit. Thanks. Thank you for making something so good. You're right. This is amazing. You'd be cute if you didn't move around like that. I want cone. Would you like to come to my house? Or is C cup not big enough? Yumiko, Saitama. Yahoo! See? That'll do nicely. I love any size servings, though. Thank you very much. But if you had really small breasts like today's guest, that would be a different story. I'm also C, by the way. No! What 4-character idiom do you like? My favorites are Shiri, Metsuretsu, chaotic, and Drokuniku, Kyo Shoku, the law of the jungle, Oga, Sukharu, and Yamagata. Ichigeki Hisatsu, one shot, one kill. Inran Kyonyu, big boobied info. I have a question for Tatsuki. How long has Orihime been supersized? Takabishi Chokuhiro Ishikawa. How long? I saw her on the field back in 7th grade, and I thought she was average, but then we were in the same class in 8th grade, and they were already pretty big. Unlike yours. There's something else written on the same letter. Let's see. Please try to take off Cone's mane. I think that would turn him into a bear. Ha! No way that's written on there. It is written on there. All right, here I go. Stop! 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 Ah! Single, Good Night, Radio Cone Baby. Ending theme, Lion, Never Surrender. Play one chorus and fade out. Now accepting letters. Any kind of question is fine. Questions are chosen at random, but the acceptance rates of postcards is probably higher than for letters. The third guest will be Uryu Ishida. Include your question, name, address, age, and telephone number, and send it to the address below. Extra, Uryu on August 1st. I don't care. I'm not really interested in fireworks anyway. And that is it for Volume 8 of the Bleach manga and Chapter 70. Let's get back to the beginning and we can talk about this chapter. So, let's get into the discussion of this chapter. We can talk about the art and the narrative, how both help kind of move the story along, kind of significant moments that are here, and our interpretations thereof, as well as my personal response to this chapter and how I kind of feel about it. The other big thing is that this is the final chapter of this volume, Volume 8, and also the final chapter of what you could consider to be the first major arc of Bleach, the Substitute Shinigami arc. From here on, obviously, Ichigo is no longer the Substitute Shinigami that he was in Rukia's place. He's, in fact, got his own Shinigami powers, and the focus of the arc is less on everything that was going on, like Ichigo being a substitute Shinigami and all this kind of world building stuff that we were getting at the beginning, and instead the focus will turn to being rescuing Rukia. The next arc will be the Soul Reaper, or not Soul Reaper, what am I saying? The Soul Society arc, right? And sometimes people will break that arc into smaller pieces, but I think I'm going to just consider it as a whole arc in one sitting. But as far as playlist reasons go, obviously this will be one of the shorter arcs, this Substitute Shinigami arc. It is still 70 chapters, which is, over a year of publication. That's about a year and a half. I think in general, arcs for manga, I like it whenever they last about 2 years or so. I think that's a strong kind of basis for how long an arc should go to feel really satisfying. But, more discussion on that at another time. Anyway, let's get into this first chapter before we talk about those larger picture things, right? So we open up and we are at that underground area beneath his store, and I love that there's this ridiculously long ladder that climbs down and kind of scales down the page to where all of our characters are. And we just get this large shot, and of course we can immediately tell there's no other location like this so far in Bleach. And so, we even get those kind of withered, awful trees, and we immediately know where we are. Of course, here we have, all of our characters reacting in different ways. I think it's fantastic the ways in which we get to see our characters juxtaposed from each other in the same panel. I think that's one of my favorite things that happens in this chapter is that we get to see all these different reactions from our 4 human protagonists. It's really cool. Of course, I do like the, Ichigo really gave the place a hard time whenever he got here, but Tessai is really happy that Orihime appreciates the place. Of course, this for Ichigo becomes a moment for reflecting on the fact that Orihime is really, amicable and easy to get along with and quick to make friends, whereas Chad is more quiet and Uryu is a little too serious. I love Uryu immediately calls Ichigo out, and I love Ichigo, just kind of his expression there. It's all good stuff. This is pretty neat. So we already saw this gate before, but it's cool that we get to see it kind of slam together. And we get explanation for why it looks the way it does and everything that it does. This is also just generally a really cool panel for Urahara. And I like that this Senkaimon is presented as this literal portal. So, like a door could be a portal. Any sort of entrance way is a portal. And so I like that it's very evocative of a door. There are a lot of different ways that you could do this, but I think the way that it is done here, especially with all the different like little papers on it, the seals, what have you, those all give it this really like constructed sort of quality that make it feel more slipshod or more kind of thrown together than the entrance to Soul Society that Renji and Byakuya went through, which had those kind of sliding doors. I don't know if you remember, or if that's more prominent in the anime. But anyway, we do get all of our various characters reacting to it, and I love that again we get to see kind of all of them turning and looking over there, and Kisuke explains, from the beginning of where we had before, where, there's the chance that they might die even going through the gate. This chapter cover is phenomenal. Like where the hollows fear to tread is obviously it's the Don guy, which is what that's referring to, and the kind of focus of this chapter where they're all going to be at. We get Rukia here just completely bare, but covered by these black strands that come down, and they're kind of reflective of either, like bamboo or ribbons. I like that they kind of tie into her hair at that point too. I think that's just like a neat visual, but also could be sorts of like strands of fate or something like that. The way that I also read this is like gel bars, right? So she is trapped in this place that has confined her more or less. But it's a nice reminder of Rukia, and it's a pretty evocative image nevertheless. Anyway, we get our last Ichigo being thrust out of his body. I love that, here he puts it at the back of Ichigo's head, but it's coming through his throat here. I guess, whenever he finally decided to thrust it through, Ichigo's head rolled back and it went through his neck. Nevertheless, pretty wild. I love all the looks of Ichigo being kicked out of his body are always fantastic. Of course, this is the first time anybody else has seen this happen, so throws them for a loop. Of course, Ichigo's like telling them not to touch it, right? I like that Chad has caught his body as it has fallen back. I assume that's the case here, but it could be that he's just lifting it up as they all kind of poke and prod at Ichigo. Nevertheless, Kon has arrived, and he's planning on actually coming with them to Soul Society. It's interesting that he says that's going to be my body for a while, but then he says that, his plan was to come to Soul Society as well. So it's like, what are you going to inhabit Ichigo's body and stay here on Earth, or what's going on, right? Was his plan to go into Ichigo's body and then go through the Senkaimon gate? What's the deal? Yeah. And since the ride into Soul Society, whatever happens, of course, we have these different reactions where both Uryu and Orihime don't know about Kon, so they're very surprised. But Chad had that moment where he saw Kon running around, and Chad loves cute things, as we've learned. So it is, in fact, this dream reunion. And I interpret this as Chad with a slight blush, even, as he picks up Kon and, is surprised. Maybe. Of course, the different expressions from Ichigo is pretty annoyed by this, and Uryu, who's just awkward. And we then transition to actually talking about this gate, and we get a lot of explanation for things that, it's very helpful. I think it would have been fine to gloss this a little bit more, but I'm glad that we got it nevertheless. Because there are a couple different things that you could be like, wait a minute, but they're people. How would they, X, Y, and Z? So it explains the mechanics of all of this. Basically, that this gate is not just a tunnel gate that's going to help them go to the Don Guy and then to Soul Society, but it also converts their Reishi, converts their Kishi into Reishi. So it's kind of neat. I guess, it doesn't kill them because it's not really severing their chains of fate. It's just literally converting their material forms into spiritual forms, which is kind of wild. Of course, these are the Katsugo Fu, these Union tags are the things that are all over it. It's neat that, of course, Uryu is the one to kind of take a lot of interest in this and start to study it, because as you know, as a Quincy, he actually manipulates Reishi on the regular. So those spirit particles that make up every spiritual being, but also just are in the air ambiently around anyway, are the things that power his Quincy abilities, right? He draws them in and then repurposes that Reishi to fire it as his bow. So he would be a little bit more familiar with Reishi than everybody else in the group, really. Of course, we've talked about like being the spiritual body or the Kanpaku, right? And that Ichigo went through all that training to be able to move around as a Kanpaku to function as a Soul Reaper. But the important thing is that everybody else needs to be able to go to the Soul Society as well, right? And we get that explanation that their Kishi is transformed into Reishi as they pass through this gates. So that way they won't have to all be, made into Soul Reapers in the same way, etc., etc. Interestingly enough, they have this note of like you can enter the Soul Society looking exactly the way that you do now, which is curious. I wonder if that how much that's a translation thing, or that is maybe there are ways that you'll come out looking a different way if you're to transfer between the two realms or not. Yeah, I don't know. There is certainly this notion of transformation. I bring that up because, of course, we do have like hollows that transform and are able to materialize between the worlds and stuff, but it also might be reference to how Ichigo kind of enters this sort of Shinigami form, right, where he's got the Shihakusho on and all of that as well. It could be a number of things. Anyway, the really important thing is, of course, that they will be in the Dangai and that they only have 4 minutes to pass through and make it to Soul Society. Here, this is drawn much more square, I guess, to match really the kind of square set of the panel that it's in. I do like it whenever it's a little bit more rectangular looking. Anyway, obviously, once you enter the Dangai, you need to pass through, or else you'll be trapped there. And that is a problem because there is the Koryu, which will paralyze you and prevent you from moving. So you don't want to get stuck there forever. It would be a terrible, terrible time. You'd probably die. Of course, I like that there's a bit of hesitation, and Yoriichi reminds them that they will need to move forward. And it's kind of neat here in that we get Yoriichi coming along with them. I like that a lot. More really just kind of great shots of everybody kind of taking this a little bit more seriously and taking in the words that Yoriichi has. And I think these really reflect the sort of mantra that Old Man Zangetsu gave to Ichigo, right? That, don't stop or look back, don't have any fear, just move forward, right? Face down the opponent that's in front of you. And so I think that's, not done haphazardly. I think that's intentional because, of course, Ichigo immediately has that sort of, you're preaching to the choir moment. We came here, our minds were made up. So at least for Ichigo, everything Yoriichi is saying here is something that he's already come to the conclusion of himself anyway. I like that, of course, we do get Yoriichi that's going to be leading them. That's pretty cool. We also get these clouds, even though I assume they're painted onto the roof of this place, otherwise magicked in somehow. But it is cool looking nevertheless. Of course, we get the stakes here that, yes, this is deadly, you'll never return if you fell, and I love this very adamant Ichigo that they will have to win. And I think that's good stuff. We always love to see our protagonists shine, and here Ichigo is being very, very, very kind of aware of the danger, but he's still, steeled himself and ready to go forward and win in this battle to come. I also, I think casting Ichigo with this sort of, rim lighting kind of thing here, where we've got him kind of in shadow, is cool. We get to see this very kind of serious expression of his, and it's made that much more kind of intense. I don't know exactly where this light is meant to be coming from rather than everywhere, but it works for the dramatic sort of shading there. And I love this zoom in on Yoriichi as they express, it's exactly the case. The group teleports away, or rather the portal opens as both Tessai and Urahara have to slam their hands and do something concerning the little circles that were in front of it in an earlier panel. Of course, Kon has been tied up so that he can't run in along with them, which I think is kind of cute. And of course, I do like this exchange that Ichigo has with these last, perhaps potential last words that he has with Kon, where he expresses that Kon should take care of his family. And this isn't the first time that Ichigo's expressed this to Kon, right? If you remember in the Grand Fisher fight, Ichigo let Kon know that should something happen to him, he will need to be in his body to take care of his family and look after them. Here we get to see that Ichigo's Zanpakuto. We haven't really gotten to see it from behind, but here we see that it is in fact sheathed in the rope that comes off of the bottom of, or rope. What am I saying? The kind of fabric, the cloth that wraps around the handle, also works as a sheath for the rest of it. It creates a pretty cool visual. I will say, notably, there's a really cool unsheathing. I believe it's in the Detective Life intro in chapter 2, the second intro for the Bleach anime. Which, again, if you haven't watched the anime and this is the furthest that you've read, that second intro will spoil a lot of things for you, in that it will show you a bunch of characters that appear that haven't been shown yet. Otherwise, will kind of hint at a bunch of things that you just haven't been savvy to. So I don't recommend watching it unless you are already familiar with what is to come. But if you are, for sure, go watch it and marvel at the moment where Ichigo unsheaths his sword, his Zangetsu. But here, I think, again, we're getting this kind of very serious moment from Ichigo, and as usual, we don't get to see his expression as he imparts this sort of last wish upon Kon, that Kon should take care of his family. And I think that it's a pretty serious moment for Ichigo, that even now, he's thinking about his family, and he's thinking about, what might come to pass. But of course, that moment only lasts for these first 3 panels, as they must move forward through the Senkaimon. And I like that we get the very, different silhouettes for all of our characters. You can really easily tell who is who based off their height and their build, and, other kind of features about them. It's good stuff. Of course, we get a 2-page spread that doesn't work too well in my reader, but the idea of the entire gang, all kind of seeing this Senkaimon they've entered. This is the portal that they came from. There's these, large kind of skeletal remains of something. It's wild that this is like the pelvis of something, but also looks like a skull, and then it spines up into something that's melting. And they're in this sort of tunnel of some sort of frothy kind of thing, this mist that's coming down around them. Assumably that is, that might not be the entrance. That might actually be because Yorishi's facing, and I said that was the way they came in. It might be the exit. So they just have to make it all the way down there within 4 minutes, right? Of course, the idea is that the walls are literally closing in upon them. We turn back and we see that, Mr. Urahara here, Kisuke, he touches the entrance to the Dangai, and it shocks him. He has to pull his hand back, and it is like still smoking, and he clutches it into a fist. And we're left to kind of wonder what exactly that means. Is he not able to pass through this because he's not able to transfer his Kishi into Reishi? Or is it something kind of more significant? Is he literally, they brought up banishing from the Soul Society, right? Has he literally been able to, made unable to pass through this Dangai, or the Senkaimon gate into the Dangai? It's unclear. For whatever reason, though, it seems as though the entering way denies him. So we get the sense that the reason that Kisuke didn't come along is because he literally can't. Instead, he has to impart and trust in all these other people. And all of a sudden, Ichigo being cultivated by Kisuke in the ways that he has isn't just sort of the thing where it's like, well, Ichigo has all this potential, he's our protagonist, etc. But it makes a lot more sense from Kisuke's perspective, where if Kisuke wanted to, have a hand in saving Rukia, because he knew everything was going to happen with Rukia, right? He was aware from very early on that she was doing things that would, eventually come to see her punished. And Kisuke said, he wouldn't be able to save her. And it's not that he would choose not to, it's that he literally cannot himself. But he was able to kind of cultivate Ichigo and get Ichigo to the point where maybe Ichigo can save her. So it's interesting that, within the restraints that Kisuke has, because this is really one of the first times that we see Kisuke unable to do something. We understand maybe a little bit more of his position. Nevertheless, he seems like he is not welcome in the Soul Society or in the other world for whatever reason it may be. And we know that, of course, he was able to create this very strange and kind of dangerous Gi guy. This Gi guy that gave Akon pause. So, nevertheless, we have to conclude that Kisuke, for whatever reason, probably tied to his history with the Soul Society, is not allowed through this gate. Or if there's something else going on, we'd have to wait and find out. We get this really great scene of all of our characters rushing forward as they run through the Dangai. And this scene of our characters just in general kind of being all together and racing forward is one that we would see a lot in, again, the second intro, the D-Techno Life intro. So it's cool that the anime intros do a good job of referencing this very strong kind of moment. And I love the way that this is set here, where the kind of hustle of this overtakes even the panel layout as our characters are cut off. Of course, Chad being too tall to be shown, so it cuts where his eyes would be. Don't get to see a lot of Chad's eyes anyway, but it's good stuff. I like the balance here where we get all of our characters moving forward and that they are actually in the order that they've been introduced. So we have Ichigo, followed by Orihime, then Chad, then Uryu. I just think it's pretty good arrangement and layout. Everybody gets to be shown, and nobody is really made the center of attention. Instead, they feel like they're truly a group, even though they haven't really done that much training together. Of course, here Kisuke, really says it's all up to Ichigo as we get Ichigo racing forward, and our volume concludes. But there's a little bit more to talk about, I suppose, in the popularity contest. I kind of talked about this already when we were going through, but I do think it's kind of cute, the ways in which all these characters got rated. Here's that Shinigami sort of symbol that we have seen before. That was notably several chapters back, but we get to see it again. That's going to be an important kind of icon moving forward, but it shows up mostly in these kind of art bits before it does ever significantly within the plot. But, all in all, I really do like this poster. I used the color version of it for my intro video for the channel originally, and I've considered updating that intro video, but I think it's fine as it is. Maybe whenever I get better recording equipment, I will. Here we get this back and forth between Kon and Tatsuki as she gets interviewed, and I think it's all kind of cute, especially how Kon gets repeatedly pummeled as he gets more and more perverse with his insertions. It is cute that one person made a Kon plush and that it gets to get immortalized within the volume of Bleach. It's great stuff. Rose would eventually end up being a name that a character has in Bleach, so I wonder if that name actually was inspired by this person who made the Kon plush. Maybe. Anyway, I love, of course, they have their own different phrases that they like. I love Tatsuki's being one shot, one kill, and then Kon's being a non-phrase of big booby nympho. But otherwise, we get a few little insights, of course, pronunciation guide on Tatsuki's name, maybe. Otherwise, not a ton there. I do love that we get the explanation that Uryu wasn't a part of the fireworks festival because he was too busy, of course, sewing his Quincy outfit. And so here we have confirmation that he, in fact, sewed it himself, which is cute. Anyway, that's all about this chapter. I think the next big thing that I want to talk about before I get back to spoilers, I'll get to maybe a good place to leave this on the page as I discuss a little bit of what we have going on. So, as I stated earlier, this is the end of the first arc of the Substitute Shinigami arc for Bleach. And so, again, that first arc would be the first 70 chapters, the first 8 volumes of the series. This will all be in a singular playlist of its own, in case you just want to visit that one arc at any point in time. I'm going to continue to have playlists just for each arc. But the rest of the arcs of Bleach tend to be much longer. Um, do keep in mind, Bleach is this is something I should know off the top of my head. It's somewhere between 700 and 800 chapters. It's in that range. Um, so there are a few very small arcs and there are a few larger ones. I will usually cut these down by the larger arc, but I might make smaller playlists for these sections within as well. We'll just have to see as we go along. Nevertheless, less about what I'm going to do and more about this arc in general. So, I really like the Substitute Shinigami arc. I think it is a fantastic introduction to the series, and I think unlike a lot of the other sort of setup arcs that we get in manga and anime, I think it has a lot of significance in the way in which it ties into the rest of the arcs. It's pretty common in a series to have like an introductory arc that then sort of otherwise, sets up the world and the characters, but then they end up doing very different things after that first arc. We get that pretty commonly. Of course, this does vary from manga to manga, but especially if we consider something like Yu Hakusho, which I think Bleach does a lot of lifting from, takes a lot of inspiration from. That has very different kind of arcs within it. You don't have to look much further than Hunter x Hunter to see anime and manga that has a very significantly different first arc from the Hunter exams, which are really kind of everything building into the idea that, okay, well, then you're going to be hunters, and then what are you going to do with that as you move forward, right? One thing that I will say that I think is a strength of this first arc of Bleach is that, again, a lot of the elements introduced really do come up later and see payoff. And so almost everything that is minorly mentioned, from the hollows to the different kind of departments and aspects of Soul Society to like literally like minor lines about that being grounds for execution that Rukia says in the first chapter. There's a lot of like small things that come up, and a lot of the reason why I'm doing Bleach Revisited rather than Naruto Revisited or something like that, other than Bleach being a huge favorite of mine. I really do love this manga. One of the reasons that I'm doing it is because I think Kubo does a very good job of building upon very small elements and fleshing out this world. That said, not everything gets entirely explored, and I'm fine with that too. I think there's a pretty significant issue that some people have where whenever a manga or whenever any sort of fiction starts to get a little evocative and starts to build its world, they want to see all these different things. But this is a story first and foremost. It's a narrative about Ichigo and his journeys. And so we don't have time to explore everything that's happening with the R&D division, for instance, right? We'll get glimpses whenever they are related to our main story, and it's going to definitely be evocative of like, well, what's going on there? Like, I'd like to know more about those characters, and I'd like to see more of their day to day and all of that. And there just isn't space to do that within a manga that isn't focused on those characters. And I'm fine with that, and I think I'm fine with that in media in general. I like whenever things are evocative. I like whenever I can imagine this larger world, but I don't need those things shown to me. Whereas there are certainly a lot of readers that will consider that to be a shortcoming of a series. Like, oh, it sets up all this stuff, but we never get real payoff for it. And in my mind, the idea that it is effectively not even set up, but just evocative, that itself is the payoff. The payoff is that I can imagine this world and I can see it as this very multifaceted sort of place where there are all these other stories happening. And because of the structure of narrative, I am just following one character's story. But that all these other characters have these very interesting and involved stories, and there's all this other stuff going on in the world. It makes it feel bigger than just any one character, and it makes it feel more more realistic because, you know, in real life we all have our own stories, and it's not just like about any one person. Everything is, you know, a lot going on, right? The world is rich and full of detail, and so being able to bring that to a fictional work, I think, is one of my favorite things. Um, so, you know, it's certainly different. It takes a different kind of way of looking at the media, I think. You know, the way in which you engage with it. I think some people will engage with manga where they want everything to be shown to them or explained to them. That's the thing that I've talked about before, that kind of idea of evoking versus explaining, of showing rather than telling. All of that's kind of present here. And I think in general, Kubo tends to be an author that evokes things and that shows things, but doesn't really explain as much. We do get very expository moments, and I think some of the weakest moments are Bleach are whenever a character is just saying, "Oh, this is the way that my power works," and it's like, well, you could have just used it; it would have been fine. Anyway, all in all, like I said, I think that the first like whole I was about to say chapter, the whole first, boy, now it's not even coming to me. Arc, there we go. Words, I can think of them. Whew, but to give you some Karakura bronze moments here or something. Anyway, the whole first arc of Bleach, I think, is it's good stuff. I think it really very effectively establishes the themes of Bleach. That there's this main character, and he's this very individualistic person that has these strong bonds to other people, cares about protecting them, and that's what fuels him and fuels his journey. And he is often at odds with society, which will, you know, put the good of society or the importance of laws above the importance of the individual or the significance of those bonds. And so a lot of the antagonists that we have seen have been, you know, other than the Hollows, we have seen antagonists like Renji and Byakuya, who have started to kind of really exemplify the idea of a character who cares less about those actual bonds and cares more about these larger structures. And even whenever Uryu Ishida was antagonistic towards Ichigo, it was because he was acting out of this sense of, you know, Quincy pride or his duty as a Quincy, of this larger Shinigami Quincy conflict, than his actual lived experience and connection with Ichigo or his master. And Ichigo had to remind him of that, right? So all in all, I think it does a really good job of all of that, of being very evocative, building this very neat world in which we're then delving towards, of course, the if anything is a payoff, the idea of how much Soul Society has been teased out, even from chapter one for us. And now we're moving to Soul Society as a place. So that's going to be our new setting. We're going to be interacting with all these different Soul Reapers as antagonists. We're going to see our characters put into a lot of very dangerous situations, right? The downside, of course, is that it's a drastic change in the structure, the basic narrative structure, where a lot of what we got early on were these kind of miniature arcs of like introducing a character and having their whole introduction tied to a hollow attack, right? So we got, you know, the introduction of Ichigo and it's tied to the attack of Fishbone D, and then we get the introduction of Orihime and it's tied to fighting Acid Wire, then we get the introduction of Chad and it's tied to Shrieker, and then, or was it tied to Shrieker? Chad's tied to Shrieker. Yeah, okay, losing my mind. And then and then we get, you know, Uryu, and he has everything going on with the Minos Grande, and then we have this whole section where it's like, okay, well, we've got to fight, you know, Grand Fisher, and so, you know, even with Don Kanoji, it's like, oh, here's the Demi Hollow, and there's always this kind of coupling of like this hollow threat and this sort of monster of the week sense of like, okay, well, here's this new hollow threat, and it's going to develop our characters in these different ways as they have to form these bonds and kind of overcome this kind of threat, right? And that structure of being like, okay, consistently a new threat from this larger organization, you know, on this kind of not week by week basis, but on these like kind of smaller miniature arcs that all help to develop these characters. That large, like by and large, kind of gets dropped. The idea of like, you know, okay, our characters obviously they're not going to be in the human world anymore, so we're going to have less of that kind of downtime or that sort of urban atmosphere, which I think is maybe a bit of an issue because again, one of the really strong things about Bleach is that juxtaposition between this urban sort of life in this metropolitan area and fighting these supernatural sort of fiends, right? This hard juxtaposition between those two worlds, and of that one world encroaching upon the other in a way that we usually don't like think of, this sort of fantasy meets reality that I think makes Bleach markedly different from a lot of its peers. And so whenever we start the series, like, unlike One Piece, which takes place in a big fantasy world, or Naruto, which takes place in like ninja villages in a fantasy world, we have Bleach, which takes place like literally in a part of Japan, at the current day. And so the way in which I think you would normally engage with this manga is significantly different from the way that maybe you might come to engage with it later. It's still got cool fights. It still does a lot of that. It still does this sort of antagonist as a part of a larger sort of group. We still get a lot of those sorts of connections, but it loses the same structure that it did before. And so I think people that were really into the structure of early Bleach often kind of bemoan that change. They sort of wish that the whole series could be about Ichigo sort of doing his substitute Shinigami things as his friends develop powers and they all fight hollows and get the team up and do interesting things. And maybe they wanted to spend a little bit more time in that space. That said, I always feel like, all of that first arc was always sort of building Soul Society subtly through the shadows and building them as this larger sort of antagonistic force. So, I think I would be more on that kind of side if there weren't all the rest of that building up towards this next arc. So I'm kind of more okay with that transition to the Soul Society arc. I'm much more fine with that. And by and large, the Soul Society arc often is lauded as probably the best part of Bleach. That said, I love this first arc. I think this first arc is phenomenal. I think this first arc does a really good job in showing what you need to do to make an effective manga, and that you need to have very quick, sort of evocative introductions to all the characters of your cast. You should have them put into very dangerous situations with lots of conflict that's both personal as well as kind of existential, right? That they have to fight these things literally to survive, but also it has them questioning things about themselves and how all the assumptions they've made about their lives, et cetera, et cetera. But then, I think also you get this cast of very diverse and interesting characters on their own right. So, all in all, I think it's good stuff. I think it's fantastic. It's really one of my favorite parts of the series, and it was a lot of fun getting to read through all of it again. I was surprised myself by how much actually connected to later parts of the manga, and like just how much there was there that is easy to overlook or forget. So, good stuff. I'm really glad that we managed to get through all of this, and I'm very excited to move on to the Soul Society arc, which is another arc that I adore. So, yeah, let me know in this video, what your thoughts are on the entire first arc, like in the comments. Let me know, like how you feel about the entire Substitute Shinigami arc, or these first 70 chapters of Bleach, because this is really, from here on out, we'll be in an entirely different arc. Our focus is going to be elsewhere. So I'm curious how other people's kind of mindset is, how they feel about this first arc, especially after revisiting it. Because I think, on initial read, I was into Bleach. I definitely enjoyed it whenever I was young. But coming back and rereading it, I see a lot of really great work being done here, both narratively and kind of just in terms of an author building up their own style as well as their sense of narrative structure. That a lot of the kind of structures that Koba would start to use here about how he would have fights kind of play out are the ways in which he would kind of page by page sort things out, end up carrying through much of Bleach. And so it's neat to see that built upon and iterated early on whenever I feel like, it's stuff that we have seen so much later of, and we really got to see kind of maybe be more familiar with the later parts of and forget a little bit of this early stuff. But it's neat to see a lot of that genesis of it here early. Anyway, if you see anything else in the art or the narrative that you'd like to point out in this chapter, please let me know. Or if you'd like to discuss anything within this, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts. I'd have to kind of point out the things that I felt were significant and important. Of course, the biggest being obviously the Dangai and the whole deal with the Sinkaimon gates. I love how different it is from the sort of gate that Rukia and Rinji and Byakuya used. And in general, I think it's pretty neat. Also, notably, there was no Hell Butterfly with this one because it's not tied explicitly to a gate from Soul Society itself. I assume, the way that this gate works is that they have to go through the Dangai and then to rush through it, unlike the Sunkaimon gates that are rather the gates that they were using from the Soul Reapers, I assume. That brings them straight to Soul Society, but, I don't remember if that's ever expounded upon. Anyway, all good stuff. Very interested to hear your takes on this as well. But let's talk about spoilers, right? Let's get back to the beginning of this chapter. Let's discuss how this connects to the rest of Bleach, because there are some connections here that I do think are kind of significant. So, of course, I like that Tessai has new glasses. I didn't mention that before, but his shattered glasses he's replaced. But also that he's very glad that somebody appreciates him and his handiwork, and maybe speaks towards Tessai using Kido to help shape this space. Of course, we got different, things of Aruru helping to dig the shattered shaft, things like that. So I wonder how much of this was under Tessai's supervision or not. How much, he used some sort of time and space Kido to really form this place. I don't imagine they all just got shovels and dug it out. Clearly, big thing here is the significance of this Sinkaimon Gates and Uryu, or not Uryu, what am I saying? Urahara. Ugh, you names, right? As we know, the Dangai ends up being pretty significant because that's where Ichigo would later train because time is dilated there. But here is our first introduction to it, and it's neat that it comes up so early. Of course, it's another thing that we would go to revisit later on. I will mention the kind of cool thing here with Koan, of course. I guess before I get to anything else, I will bring up Koan insisting upon coming on this journey, and that being something that doesn't really ever get to do until the 1,000-Year Blood War, and even then, we don't really see Koan do anything significant. But nevertheless, it is cool that we consistently get Koan kind of wanting to be a part of the adventure. I don't know that the Katsugo Fu ever come up again, but the idea of having this reishi conversion machine is pretty insane, right? The idea of being able to convert Kishi into reishi. Whenever I talk about earlier the idea of like without looking like a Kanpaku, I was thinking a little bit of Yurichi, right? That Yurichi clearly looks like a cat rather than like the Kanpaku of her actual form, right? And I don't know how much I want to interpret that as Yurichi kind of looking like a cat because that's the it's some sort of like it has something to do with her exiting back from the Soul Society. It's impossible to enter it without looking like a Kanpaku. Obviously, you'll have to be a Kanpaku to enter the Soul Society. So I don't know, like this idea of like the way that you look and that being significant. With Yurichi looking like a cat, the way that I've always sort of interpreted that is that Yurichi is here a actual physical cat gi guy that Urahara has created. Mostly so that and obviously Yurichi goes through the gate and becomes a Kanpaku of that cat form as they go to Soul Society, or I guess as a reishi variant of it, whatever the actual Kanpaku. So it's a thing to think about. That's one of the big kind of, I say, big mysteries of Bleach. The whole cat form with Yurichi and Yurichi's affinity with kind of a cat likeness is strange, right? Like what's going on? The cat is fine too. Urahara keeping his quote best friend as a cat. All that's kind of weird, and I don't read that as, there's certain people that I think look at it as a beast realm sort of related thing, and I really don't see it that way, because we don't really see any other connection that she has to beast realm other than maybe her cat goddess form thing. And even then, that's tenuous at best. The way that I tend to read the cat thing is, like I said, that Urahara basically created a special Gigai for Yurichi so that she could be undercover in the human world, because she is still Yurichi of the House Shihoin, and she needs to be able to appropriately hide her Shinigami Reiatsu, right? So, what better way than to have her in a cat Gigai, because she has a pretty striking appearance otherwise, right? Urahara, it makes sense for him to stay in his body, or, a human body that looks like him, because he was, of course, banished from the Soul Society, or at the very least, it fled the Soul Society. So the expectation would be that he would be running around on Earth as he is. But for Yurichi, her support of him and her fleeing was more on her own regard. She wasn't tied up in everything in the same way that he was, as well as Tessai, right? So, it's something to consider. I definitely consider that to be a Gigai made by Urahara, because he's certainly capable of it, and it would make a lot of sense for trying to evade suspicion, and the fact that she's not always there could speak towards her running around in even perhaps the Soul Society as a cat. Anyway, of course, we get all that explanation of turning the Kishi to Reishi, etc., etc. I'm trying to think of, what other big connections that I really want to draw. Of course, time being kind of significant here, and time ends up being pretty significant throughout all of Bleach, right? This idea of, well, you have 4 minutes to get here or else you die, or like you have this many days until Rukia's execution. So I think here, at least here and forward, Kubo starts to become really aware of using time as this sort of dramatic element, right? I don't know that it ever works for me personally, but it is certainly a way to convey this sense of, like, you only have so much time before something really important sort of happens. Of course, it's interesting here that we don't get mention of the cleaner, which is the real threat. I guess the Koryu will paralyze you if it closes upon you, and so that's important. Um, And so we get this reminder of the heart and soul being connected, and the state of the heart being crucial, right? Of one's conviction being very important to their power as a soul. And I do like that a lot, as we will come to see that, these characters, I think, one of the things that a lot of people might criticize is, like, how could these human characters possibly stand up against these Shinigami characters? How are they able to rise to such heights? And part of it, I think, might have to do with the Hogyekyo fulfilling their wishes, right? That it's literally their will to go forward that is their guide, haha, and that being made manifest. But I think more than that, it's this whole idea that their literal willpower is actually fueling them, compared to a lot of the people in Soul Society, which are not really, their strength of will isn't maybe as strong. That their convictions are more towards this kind of greater sense of the Soul Society rather than any sort of personal thing. Anyway, I was going to mention the last little bit here, and this is pretty minor, but I brought it up before, that the wrapping, right, that white cloth being representative of Yuhabak's power, of the Quincy power, literally sheathing his own power in it. And here we see that as an actual sheath. So, again, every Zanpakuto having those two parts, having the sheath and the blade, and seeing that that is part of the blade too, but also ends up working as the sheath, I think is kind of visually cool. But also speaks towards Ichigo's weapons nature, right? Towards this idea of, he has this absolute offensive sort of weapon, so much so that the sheath is even a part of the blade. I think that's pretty significant. A lot of thought basically went into this design, and it's neat to see it as it is. Of course, we get this sort of wild Don guy. I love all the bones on the floor. But, not much else to say there. As far as Urahara not being able to pass through, we eventually do get Urahara in Soul Society, but I imagine at that point he's pardoned and allowed in for whatever reason. I mean, he's never reinstated to being a captain or anything of the like, so there is that, but he does. Well, I say that, does he ever actually return to Soul Society? Now that I'm thinking about it, because in Hueco Mundo arc, we get him at Fate Karakura, right? We get him being a little bit of a part of that. I'm trying to think where else we could really get to see Urahara, because I was thinking about Thousand Year Blood War, and he's certainly there and a part of that, but he's over on the Hueco Mundo side of things, isn't he? So I could be wrong, but does Urahara ever return to the Soul Society? Am I just losing my mind? And obviously I know he's part of Binding Eyes in the very end of that other arc, but yeah, maybe Urahara never returns to Soul Society. Maybe he literally actually can't return and that never changes, and I've just forgotten that. Huh. Anyway, if Urahara does go back to Soul Society, if this actually does get brought up later, let me know. But I think he is his soul is literally banished from there, which is why he's not able to pass through this gate. I believe that's the read of this that is the important kind of way to take away from it. Which is kind of curious, nevertheless. Because obviously he was able to leave, but I guess they were able to impose this sort of banishment upon him after that fact. I don't know. If there's something that brings this up later, or if Urahara actually does return to the Soul Society in any capacity, and I'm just forgetting about it, please let me know in the comments. Just make sure to tag it as a spoiler first and foremost, so that you're not spoiling anybody else. Now, yeah, I do, I brought this up in the analysis, but the idea of Urahara cultivating Ichigo because he's not able to return to Soul Society is exactly, I think, significant. In that, Urahara realizes that he needs to really shift his plans towards cultivating someone other than himself, where Aizen can really focus on self-cultivation and kind of expanding his own capabilities in order to affect change. Urahara really needs to be able to influence others in order to uphold everything that he cares about. And that's kind of interesting, and that might be born out of this banishment of him not being able to actually go back to the Soul Society. I don't know. Anyway, to the popularity contests, of course, we had the Substitute Shinigami badge symbol showing up here on Ichigo. I feel bad about some of these characters, right, not getting voted up, but that's fine. It's amazing that Keigo is that high. Yeah. And I don't know that I have much else to say that connects this to the rest of Bleach. Is what it is. I think that's the large end of it. I do think it's interesting that we have Uryu kind of make his own Quincy robes, because I was speculating on that before, if they were something passed down or not. How much they were his own design. Obviously, they are very reminiscent of the robes that we would see from later Quincy. So it's cool that they have that visual sort of similarity and motif, and that he's definitely paying homage to that tradition. Anyway, that's all that I have for this chapter. I don't really have anything else to say about it, but nevertheless, we've already gotten to over an hour in the video. These end of volume ones always end up being a little bit longer, but then I also wanted to discuss in short the first arc. As far as spoilers for the first arc go, and like discussing the first arc in relation to the rest of Bleach, I still like it in relation to the rest of Bleach. I think it's really strong. I think it's a really good starting point. I think it does a very good job of establishing not just Soul Society and Hueco Mundo and Hollows, because like that's one maybe argument that a lot of people have is like, oh, all that Hollow shit that seems so significant in the beginning seems kind of dropped, and I would argue not at all, because Hueco Mundo literally ends up being the next major arc, and we get to see that develop a lot more, and that whole world of Hollows becomes significant once more. And if we didn't have everything in the beginning to help build that foundation, then it would feel more out of nowhere. Obviously, the scale of the kind of hollows that we're fighting is ramped up to being a Ronkar. But, we needed hollows to be much more human for them to be effective sort of antagonists anyway. And we were already starting to see that with Grand Fisher, D. Roy, and really, like, even characters like hollows like Shrieker and Acid Wire were still more human and I guess more communicative than they were monstrous. Whereas, whenever we consider maybe Fishbone D and the Demi Hollow, we can kind of consider them less as full, like, fledged sort of characters, right? Nevertheless, I think the decisions that were made in the Hueco arc are very smart ones and leverage a lot of the strengths of what was introduced about Hollows in the very beginning in that Substitute Shinigami arc. I ultimately think this is a fantastic arc in relation to the rest of Bleach, and it's been a lot of fun rereading it for that reason too. Getting to see again the beginning of all these characters' journeys. I think the most phenomenal thing that I will say, and the thing that's blown me away the most, is just how much everything connects back to that one sort of moment with Don Kanoji, because in retrospect it feels so innocuous, like whatever, like who cares about Don Kanoji or this the whole Demi Hollow thing, right? That whole episode, or that whole like kind of like little series of chapters feels on its own insignificant in the larger picture of Bleach, but it being the kind of moment in which Uryu decided that he was going to confront Ichigo, which obviously we know how that spelled out, and then also because it was broadcast, that being the way that they found Rukia and her Gigai, I think is also significant. Because otherwise she would have been kind of, Rukia's Gigai would have never been found, and essentially Kisuke could continue to cultivate Ichigo or whatever, basically have the Higekyo hidden, and it wouldn't be an issue, I think, right? Ichigo would be able to continue to fight Hollows, eventually come to power of his own, perhaps, who knows? Speculation, speculation, speculation. Anyway, all in all, I think in relation to the rest of Bleach, it's a fantastic first whole segment, and I think it works really well in setting up for all these other arcs that we would eventually come to get. And ultimately, it's arguable how much the Thousand Year Blood War really pays off a lot of that Quincy sort of stuff that is set up that early, because there's of course people that have grievances with how much the entire Quincy versus Shinigami thing pays out in regards to characters like Mayuri, obviously. But if you're looking at it just in the lens of the first arc, I think it shows and kind of pays off to what we got from, at the very least, the first 70 chapters of Bleach, and leading into a little bit of that Soul Society stuff. So it all works for me. I think it's all fine. I think everything there is strong and works on its own, but also works to set up everything else. And that's the most you could really ask from a setup arc. Yeah, that's all I've got. That's it for this video. As always, if you've watched the video this far, I will say that you should probably give the video a like, just to let me know. I can really use that as a gauge to see just how people are engaging with this. Obviously, if you don't like what I had to say, I don't know why you're watching an hour and 15-minute video on Bleach Chapter 70, of all things, but hey, here we are. Glad you gave it your time of day. Nevertheless, let me know in the comments your thoughts, and if you'd like to see more content from me, if you'd like to see, things on these other manga, because I did mention I kind of want to cover, obviously, all the Bleach movies, maybe even some of the Bleach games. Definitely am interested in covering Kubo's other one-shots as well as Zombie Powder. Obviously, I'm going to talk about uh, Burn the Witch, but that's going to be years from now. Nevertheless, if you're interested in any of those other projects, let me know in the comments, and do subscribe to see whenever I upload anything related to any of that. Subscription really helps also put these Bleach Revisited videos in front of other people on YouTube, which is the goal. I'd like to grow this channel a lot. And another way that you can help grow the channel is supporting me on Patreon. So for as little as $1 a month, you can support me and the channel. And right now you're seeing everybody that is a patron for me over there on Patreon as of making this video. And a huge shout out and thanks goes to those people. I really do appreciate it. But thank you to everybody that watched this far. I really do like that there are people that care to listen to me ramble about Bleach for an hour every day. It certainly gives me something to do, and it has been a lot of fun to revisit this series, and so hopefully you've enjoyed it as well, and you'll continue to be a part of this discussion. As always, this has been Karkur Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. As always, stay gold.